Just how good is the 2026 NHL Draft class? We'll be previewing it today, highlighted by Gavin McKenna, who has been breaking records left and right.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we are not going to be focusing on the upcoming 2025 NHL draft class, which is approaching by the day right now. Instead, we are looking a year ahead at the 2026 NHL draft class. And for those of you who are in the know, this is a very, very strong year for prospects in 2026. So if your team is going to be tanking that season, probably not a bad thing in terms of the talent you might pick up. That draft class is highlighted by Gavin McKenna. And if you haven't heard of him, I'm not quite sure how. My mother has heard of him, and she has not watched a hockey game in the last 2 decades at least. He's been breaking records this season in the WHL with some fantastic performances. So we'll be dedicating the entire first segment, breaking down his game, looking at the statistics a little bit, and just telling you a bit more about the person behind the player on the ice here. Then in the second segment, we'll look at 4 other contenders for top 5 draft selections on draft day: Keaton Verhoef, Ethan Belchetz, Viggo Björck, and Ryan Roobroeck. Then finally, in the third segment, we'll be wrapping up the show with 5 other notable names that you should probably be aware of to bring the entire episode total to 10 players. And those names in the final segment are Mathis Preston, Xavier Villeneuve, Ivar Stenberg, Ryan Lynn, and Carson Carels. So those are the 10 players that you'll get to know a little bit better here after today's show. But before we jump into the first segment and Gavin McKenna, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So let's dive straight into this episode, because this is a very fun one. I'm very much enjoying digging into the 2026 draft eligibles, which is only beginning for me at this stage, but everything that I have seen has just been incredible. And that is highlighted by the utterly insane performances of Gavin McKenna of the Medicine Hat Tigers in the WHL. A player who's already in his 3rd season in the WHL. He played 16 games in 22-23 after playing U18 hockey, and then last season had 96 points in 61 games as a D-2, and somehow just blew that out of the water this season in 56 appearances as an assistant captain in his D-1 campaign. Just as a reminder, he turned 17 in late December. He has 41 goals, 129 points this season. That's 88 assists in there in 56 games. Just insane numbers. But to bring a little bit into perspective just how much he's been improving week upon week this entire campaign, in his last 10 games, Gavin McKenna has scored 11 goals, 27 assists for 38 points, being an absurd plus 20 over that stretch. Plus minus, never a stat I throw out there all that often on the podcast, but when a player is plus 20 in his last 10 games and has 38 points, yeah, I'm going to mention it. But Gavin McKenna has just been lighting things up here through 5 games of the WHL playoffs. He has an utterly obscene 16 points in those 5 games. It was a very short playoff series against Swift Current, where Medicine Hat won in 5 games. And the game where Gavin McKenna had the least amount of points happened actually on 2 occasions, were 2 assist nights. And that is him at his weakest. He had a couple 5-point games there on that most recent stretch. And overall, the production jumps off the page. I don't think I have to ramble all that much longer about just how insane the production is, because anyone that's opened up his statistical profile has already been introduced to the absurdity that is his Elite Prospects profile. But to dig a little bit more into the player, Gavin McKenna is an incredibly good skater. He's so dynamic with the puck. The handling, the feet flow so effortlessly together. The head fakes he's able to layer in there as well. Everything just works so fluidly. And we saw this at the U18 World Championships last May, where as a 16-year-old, he was He would have set the all-time record at that tournament were it not for James Higgins also beating it at that same tournament and getting, I think, 1 or 2 points more than McKenna did at that display. McKenna has just been breaking records everywhere he's going. But this season, let's dig a little bit into just how this statistical season compares to previous players. The only player ever in CHL history to score more points in a D-1 campaign, Sidney Crosby. That's not bad company. Gavin McKenna is truly up there in terms of the production at the WHL level, but everything that the production entails is these elite level tools, elite level brain. He's so pacey. He's such a great skater. He's so much finesse in his game, but the intelligence to find pockets of space, to get to the middle of the ice, to not just like be able to like bounce out contact or evade contact, but he's also a player that I've seen initiate contact more and more as the season has worn on, even though he is just 165 pounds at 6 feet tall. Still a lot of filling out to do he has in his frame. Still a player that I think has shown so much breadth in terms of the quality of skills he's displayed this season in the WHL. His 16 points in 5 playoff games, that's 3.20 points per game. That is basically unheard of for any D-1 player ever in CHL history. There's like no comparable for that really, at least in the research that I was able to do. And overall, I think that Gavin McKenna is a true franchise level talent in terms of what you can say in terms of a player being 17 years old. You can't be 100% sure with that ever. I mean, we've seen exceptional status players tank before. I mean, we saw it with Sean Day, like 10, 15 years ago, but that's not happening with McKenna this season. He's overwhelmingly likely going to be the first overall pick in 2026. We can already say that here now because a player would have to be truly generational, more generational than McKenna himself in order to surpass him for that first overall slot. And I don't quite see that happening, even though there is a whole bunch of talent in this draft class, which we will, of course, be digging into in the following segments here today. But to return a little bit to Gavin McKenna, this is a player who has gotten a lot of recognition already for his achievements, both his WHL performances. He was the first overall pick there, breaking records in terms of the U18, like Team Canada at the U18 World Championships, doing a lot of work there. I mean, all-time record for Canadian scoring at that tournament, and he was 16 years old at that U18 tournament. He can definitely still break that record here this year. I'd be very curious to see if he's able to do so. If, of course, he goes to the tournament, which isn't, of course, confirmed yet. He's still in the playoffs. But still, I think that McKenna is a truly, truly high-end talent that I have so enjoyed watching here so far this season. And for a little bit more context and information about the person himself, Gavin McKenna, he is a cousin through marriage of Connor Bedard's. So he's been able to also talk with Connor Bedard and get some advice on things to work on and overall advice on how to progress through these steps as a truly elite generational type talent going through the WHL systems. So being able to get advice from Connor Bedard, I think, has been very useful here for Gavin McKenna as well. And just a couple months ago, he won the APTN MVP Award. That is the Aboriginal Peoples Television Network Brian Troche MVP Award, because Gavin McKenna grew up in Whitehorse, Yukon as a part of the Trondakwetchin First Nation. And he's already become a pride of Indigenous communities in Canada in terms of the representation at the highest stages of competitive hockey. And it's not going to take him very long to start dominating the NHL either. Give it 2-3 years. I mean, I think he's going to get there pretty fast once he makes that leap to the National Hockey League. And it's also been interesting. I read a couple interviews of Gavin McKenna's before recording this, and he was delving into some detail of how he spent his summers back in going back home to Yukon, in Whitehorse, fishing, hunting, immersing himself in Indigenous culture and tradition. And he also went into depth on just how much that's meant for him and how much pride he takes from being able to not only represent his community, but also be part of his community. So those are some fun asides here, because it's not often that we have an Indigenous player being not just like a first overall caliber talent, but a truly potential generational one. That's something that is so worth noting. So very, very happy to see that in terms of Indigenous representation in hockey. There's always room to become more inclusive and to have more people and more diversity in this sport. So the fact that Gavin McKenna has been able to break all these records with his background is, I think, so inspiring for so many Indigenous youth out there on Turtle Island. But that wraps up the first segment here for us. In the next one, we'll be talking about 4 other players who I think are going to be making real big pushes for the top 5 draft slots in 2026. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and to even plan your long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, let's keep this episode rolling in the second segment, breaking down some really, really notable players here in the 2025 NHL Draft class who aren't getting quite as much airtime in terms of being talked about as Gavin McKenna has so far, but who are not going to take very long to hit the headlines and hit the highlights next season in their draft eligible campaigns. And many of them have already been littering the highlight reels with their plays here this season. And the first player I wanted to mention here is perhaps not the first player that everyone's going to mention, but as a 6'4", 212-pound right shot defenseman who's a June 19th, 08 birthday, so very young for the draft class, who skates wonderfully, has a bunch of physicality, defends the rush well, and brings a bunch of offense. Keaton Verhoef of the Victoria Royals in the WHL has been utterly insanely good this season when I've been able to tune in to watch the Royals play. Not only has he gotten involved offensively in his first full campaign in the WHL as a, again, defenseman, he has 21 goals, 24 assists for 45 points. He's consistently getting involved offensively. He has a really, really disgusting release. The curl and drag, the power behind the shot. There's a lot to like in terms of the mechanics there. And he brings so many talents in defending the rush as well. He's so rangy, keeps his gaps very controlled. Already one of the better defensemen in the WHL, and he only turned 17 in mid-June. This is a player that I think should really be high up the draft boards heading into this draft year campaign, and playing on a Victoria Royals team that's been really, really solid here down the stretch and just beat the Tri-City Americans in 5 games in the first round of the playoffs. And Keaton Verhoef had 3 assists in the final game there, a 7-0 victory. Very emphatic there to clinch their spot in the second round. But with the way Verhoef moves, the physicality, the habits, the intelligence, and the offensive tools and the handling, I think that also has room to grow. He's not the most deceptive player as of yet, but the skating and the intelligence, I think, could create that as a possibility to explore in his development moving forward. There's so much to like with this player, and definitely a guy that NHL teams are already keeping a very, very close eye on. Next up, we have from the Windsor Spitfires, Ethan Belchetz. He's a guy that with his 6'5", 227-pound frame has just been a really, really tough customer to deal with in the OHL there with Windsor, and on a Windsor team that's just been pumped full of talent after a really, really painful couple of stretches of seasons. I mean, even last year, it was Liam Greentree and nothing else on that team, seemingly. But this season, with Ilya Protosh arriving and Ethan Belchetz taking a really big step after being drafted, in 56 games this season, he had 17 goals and 38 points. Not quite at a point game mark, but he's so big. He's so physical. There's a lot of underlying skill here, but the power forward habits and the power forward foundation is already so clear to see here. I'm going to quote our North American scout at Elite Prospects, Mitch Brown, in a scouting report he wrote on February 5th here. Though he's seldom the primary puck carrier on his line, Belchetz makes quick plays off the wall and occasionally manipulates a defender into open ice to attack open space. Continued development as a skater and play reader are key, but he looks like a potential high-end prospect and a legitimate challenger for number 2 overall in 2026. And I agree. The level of violence he has in his game, among the array of skills he has as a shooter, as an off-the-wall playmaker, there's a bunch of things that he's been flashing this season. And I think that in that power forward frame and a player that has clearly taking some big strides in his development just this season, he's definitely a player that's going to be contending very, very high up there on draft day. But for him specifically, I'd be curious if we have any Windsor Spitfires fans here in the chat. I'd be very curious to hear what your opinions have been on this player, because I've only caught a couple games of him this season. So much of my impressions have also been from what I've heard from colleagues, what I've been reading around. It's not a player that I've scouted in all that much depth, but I've gotten a couple viewings in and have been very impressed in those games. But moving on, we have 2 more players here that are contending for the top 5 that I wanted to highlight. First among them, Viggo Björck from Djurgården in Hockey Allsvenskan, and mainly been playing in J20 this season, the junior league. He's a 5'9", 172-pound right shot center / winger. In terms of projection, I think the wing might be a little bit more linear, but we will see how he plays next season, of course. I'd love for him to get into some games for Djurgården. We'll see if they are able to win promotion to the SHL. If they don't, he's probably going to get a lot more minutes as well if they end up still playing in Hockey Allsvenskan next season. But he's only played 1 game at the pro level so far in his career this season, and he scored a goal in it. And overall, I mean, in J20 this season, 42 games, 27 goals, 74 points, insane level production. Again, record breaking. So Gavin McKenna is far from the only prospect in the 2026 class who has been breaking those records on his road to being a likely first overall talent next season. But Viggo Björck has really, really been impressing. And with 20 points in his last 10, he is finishing the season off very, very strong. Whether he's playing in J18 National or J20 National, he's been kind of jumping back and forth here late on in the campaign, but in the regular season, he was really overwhelmingly used at the J20 level. But some of the things that he is able to bring to the ice that I particularly appreciate are his high-level hockey sense. He's a very intelligent player, really, really good anticipation. The forechecking habits, the overall off-puck routes on both sides of the puck are a real area of strength in his game as well. He supports off-puck, he's constantly in open spaces and accessing little pockets, and it was that intelligence that made him just so dominant at the junior level this season. And overall, I think he's a player that could also really elevate other players there with Djurgården. If you see players like Frondell and Victor Eklund returning to Djurgården next campaign, I think they would combine really, really nicely with what Viggo Björck has to offer. He's a transition and power play quarterback at the junior level. I think when he takes the next step, he's probably going to be a bit less impactful in transition just because the mobility isn't quite elite. But overall, he's a very intelligent puck mover who's able to access little pockets of space and just deconstruct defenses, alone the defensive zone. So a guy that I've really, really loved watching this season, so much refinement in how he thinks the game, and he's definitely a guy that's going to get long looks from NHL scouting staffs. But to wrap up the second segment here, we have Ryan Roobroeck, another very, very big CHL forward. He's far from the only one in this draft class. He's very old for the draft class as a September 25th, 07 birthday, so just 10 days off the cutoff for being eligible for this year. But at 6'4" and 190 pounds as a left shot center who has scored 87 points in 64 games this season in the OHL, including 41 goals. He's taken a really big step in his development compared to last year, where he had 28 goals and 51 points in 63 games. Just a very, very impactful scorer in the OHL with his big body. And that got him to finish all the way up at 13th in league scoring, with the Niagara Ice Dogs leading his team in points. Just so much to love in terms of how he's been driving the offense through his physicality. Not a player I think is the most individually dynamic, but there's a lot of skill elements to his game. And the fact that he scored 12 more points than the next highest scorer on his team, which was Kevin He, who, if you remember right, had a blistering start to the campaign after being drafted by the Winnipeg Jets last season. And he's also 17 points ahead of third place, which is Andrei Loshko. So Ryan Roobroeck has really been impactful, but overall, I think with his big body, with his high effort level, and overall the power he has in his lower body in terms of that 1-2 step, just not breakaway speed or acceleration, but just a lot long limbs. He's able to kind of just take these massive strides up the ice. And he's not the most mechanically refined skater, but he's able to move quite well from A to B in a straight line. It's more in the agility. I think things can fall apart somewhat, but still, I think mobility isn't the biggest question mark with this player. And he's just going to get more and more comfortable as he gets used to his 6'5" frame. But that wraps things up here in the second segment. In the final one, we'll be wrapping up the show talking about Mathis Preston, Xavier Villeneuve, Ivar Stenberg, Ryan Lynn, and Carson Carels. 5 very notable players that are going to be making big pushes to be picked in the top 10 of next year's draft class. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. You just realized that your business needs to hire someone yesterday. How can you find the amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot before where you need the right hire like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a real setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come right in handy. They make sure that your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNHL and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, let's wrap up the show here with the final segment, breaking down the last 5 players I wanted to highlight here today. And we're going to start off in the WHL with the Spokane Chiefs because Mathis Preston has been a real joy to watch this season. He has 23 goals and 45 points in 54 games this campaign as a 5'11", 168-pound right shot winger. He's a July 24th, 08 birthday, so very, very young for the draft class. He has a lot of room to grow, but overall, this is a player with just tremendous level abilities. He's so aware of his positioning. His head is constantly on a swivel, constantly scanning, and he's able to hit very accurate passes through the middle and past layers of forecheckers. He's able to find those tiniest little gaps between seams and through gaps, and the precision behind his passing game has really left me impressed this season. And beyond that, there are some other habits in his game that come together into such an intriguing profile. First and foremost is his body positioning habits. He's really good at establishing inside positioning, has good leverage mechanics, gets down low, almost Tige Aginla-esque in terms of how he's able to protect the puck along the boards. And he's still kind of growing his playmaking game from the boards to the middle, but that's something that could really see a massive boost next season, especially playing for a team like Spokane with a lot of talent on it. I mean, Andrew Crystal and Berkeley Catton have arguably been the most dynamic pairing in the entire CHL this season, and Preston has been able to get some offense behind them, and overall, I think with his intelligence, with the skill, with the high-end foot speed, and really, really good skating, this is a player with a bunch of tools, very interesting toolkit, but it's the habits, the intelligence that I think make it all come together, as well as that skating, which of course facilitates things enormously. But moving on, we have Xavier Villeneuve, the only player here today that I've watched live before. This is a left shot defenseman who's playing in the QMJHL for the Blainville-Boisbriand Armada as a 5'10", 150. Yes, you heard that right. 150-pound left shot defenseman. He's a September 29th, 07 birthday, so very old for his draft class, almost eligible this year, and he's a player who had over a point a game from the blue line as a D-1 talent this season, with 12 goals and 62 points in 61 games with Blainville, and was just the most dynamic player on the ice in the game that I watched. And that was a game that featured both Justin Carbonneau as well as Caleb Desnoyers, 2 of the top prospects in this year's draft class. And Villeneuve is younger, he's way smaller, but he's so skilled, so intelligent. He finished 4th on team scoring behind Carbonneau, Vincent Desjardins, and Mathieu Nobert, 3 very intelligent and effective players. And overall, in the entire QMJHL among blue liners, he finished 2nd in scoring and 4th in goals. There's so much to love with the statistical profile with this player, but beyond that, on the ice, such a dynamic and fun player to watch. The first player I will say since Lane Hutson's draft year who was not named Cole Hudson, who has reminded me of Lane and how he moves, that lateral agility, the overall lateral mobility is just so incredible. And he's so deceptive and intelligent, faking one way, reading a player, committing his body weight in one direction, and just exploding the other way. He's a guy that just read and act, read, act, repeat, rinse and repeat. He's just constantly reading the play and exploiting little gaps and little weaknesses that he's able to find. And defensively as well, he's a player that I think is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. His intelligence helps a lot with very active stick work. That agility allows him to also adjust against rushes and catch up to play sometimes as well when players can just get right past him. But overall, a guy that I think has a really high ceiling in terms of the offensive upside. And I mean, as someone who has been a massive fan of Lane Hutson going back to his draft year, I am not one to throw out Lane Hutson comparables loosely at all, but Xavier Villeneuve reminded me of Lane Hutson from the first shift I watched him to the last in that game. So he's a player that is so fun. And if you're able to catch a game of his, watch him live or on TV, it is more than worth it. He is incredibly entertaining. But let's move on to Sweden now, because Ivar Stenberg is a player who's gotten quite a bit of attention in draft circles in the past year, especially going back to the Hlinka Gretzky in the past summer, where he scored 4 goals and 10 points at that tournament, a U18 tournament, I might add, at which he was competing as a 16-year-old. So that's certainly nothing to scoff at. And his 10 points were tied for third in tournament lead behind teammate Victor Klingsell and Adam Banach of Czechia. And he was tied with Milton Yestrin, who's also a draft eligible here this season. So very much in the mix with a bunch of players who are up in age group of him. He's also a September 30th, 07 birthday. So similar to Xavier Villeneuve, he's also an older player for the draft class, but as a 5'11", 172-pound winger who just plays with a lot of energy, very like sound habits, and overall, I think the professional game is going to come very easily to him, and it already has. He's already been playing in the SHL with Frölunda. He's gotten 25 games in this season, scoring a goal and 3 assists over that span, and playing mostly between 10 and even upwards of 15 to 17 minutes a night this season in recent games. So he's been getting a lot of trust as a D-1 player in the SHL, which is certainly a rarity and something to note. But he's not the most dynamic individual player, but very intelligent guy who's able to control the pace of play. But I'd love to see some more progression for him in terms of the skating speed, the overall breakaway speed, and the dynamic skill on puck. But he's a player that could certainly establish himself as a top 10 caliber talent if he's able to take those strides. And if not, you're still getting a very projectable player that has a pretty much guaranteed NHL like middle stakes kind of piece, which is definitely going to get him drafted in the first round. But let's wrap up the show here with a pair of WHL defensemen who have been really impressive with their mobility, with their offensive activations this season. And the first I want to note is Ryan Lynn of the Vancouver Giants, a right shot defenseman who stands at 5'11", 172 pounds. He's an April 18th, 08 birthday. And this season, he's played massive minutes in Vancouver. In 60 games, he's scored 5 goals and 53 points, getting so involved in terms of the offense and the production. But he brings so much more than that to the game. Even though he's not the biggest guy in the world, he brings a lot of physical habits to the game. Very good leverage mechanics, constantly getting involved physically, initiating contact, and overall just being involved in all 3 zones. He's a player with really high-end puck retrievals and rush defending ability, with the mobility really being the basis for all of those things working so well. Very intelligent player with a quick processor who's able to, as I mentioned, use his mobility to just close down gaps very aggressively. And that's made him just a really solid transition defender, even as an undersized D-1 player in the Western Hockey League this campaign. But he can still get a bit more aggressive in terms of the 5-on-5 offense. We've seen on the power play just how deceptive and creative he is with the puck on a stick and a little bit of space to work with. But at 5-on-5, it's been a little bit more come and go. But give him a year's time, and next season, I'm sure he's going to be one of the most dynamic blue liners eligible in the 2026 NHL draft. And he's definitely a guy that could push for not just top 10, but even top 5 consideration. But let's wrap up the show here with the last name I want to note. And there's a bunch of other players. Of course, these are only 10 players of an entire draft class. We'll be spending the entirety of the next year breaking down this class. So just stay tuned for more content on these guys. But to wrap up the show, we have Carson Carels of the Prince George Cougars in the WHL, a 6'1", 174-pound left shot defenseman who's very young for the draft class as a June 23rd, 08 birthday. And he scored 6 goals and 35 points in 60 games this season. The overall offensive dare in terms of trying things is certainly something I'd still like to see a bit more of. And I know other scouts on our Elite Prospects team agree with that as well. But definitely a guy that through his mobility, through strong rush defending, very good handling skill, and overall a lot of hockey sense, he's definitely a player that I think is going to get some real attention high up on draft day, because elite level mobility is such a key thing for defenders. And I think that it's going to get a lot of teams looking in his direction. He's very quick on retrievals, making quick little plays, but not the most deceptive as of yet. So there's still habits for him to kind of grow into in order to explore more of his skill game and that dynamic ability that he's flashed in moments, but hasn't been consistent this season. Overall, a player that I think has all these high-end tools, has so much room to grow into that ability that he so clearly has on the ice, and a player I think definitely deserved a mention here. But just to throw a couple honorable mentions out there, Oliver Murnieks and JP Hurlburt have really impressed me in the USHL this season, as has Mikey Burchild with the NTDP, where he's been playing with the U18s quite a bit here in the back half. And Alessandro Diorio, a pretty skilled centerman with the Sarnia Sting in the OHL. He's another player that I think could really, really develop into an intriguing, skilled guy going forward. But that wraps things up here for us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please do leave us a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about the episode and what your thoughts are on some of these prospects. Have you been able to watch any of them live before? If you have, I'd love to hear about your takeaways from those viewings down below. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers here on the podcast. And for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you need to know to build yourself a sustainable and competitive fantasy roster. But that wraps things up here for us today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I look forward to catch you tuning in again very, very soon.